The great metallic hall of the Galactic Council shimmered under the light of artificial stars. Above the circular chamber, a holographic representation of the known galaxy slowly rotated, casting prismatic reflections off the polished surfaces of the grand arena. 47 species were represented today, their varied body forms occupying specially designed alcoves that accommodated everything from the methane-breathing Voldari to the silicon-based Quartz Collective. Ambassador Jake Morrison adjusted his formal diplomatic attire and tried to ignore the stares. As the first human delegation to attend a formal council meeting, they represented what many in the galaxy referred to with a mixture of fear and fascination as Deathworlders, species that evolved on planets considered uninhabitable by galactic standards. "Remember," whispered his aide, Tessa Reynolds. "Minimum gesturing. Many species interpret rapid hand movements as threats." Jake nodded almost imperceptibly. 6 months of intensive diplomatic training had drilled the protocols into him, but the weight of representing all of humanity before the assembled dignitaries of the galaxy left his mouth dry. As a former linguistics professor specializing in nonverbal communication, he understood the importance of body language across cultures. Now that understanding would be tested across species. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Jake Morrison of Earth," announced High Counselor Zandrak, his translucent tentacles waving in the formal pattern of acknowledgement. Jake stepped forward to the central platform that rose gently to position him at the focal point of the chamber. "Esteemed representatives of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice automatically translated into 47 distinct communication forms. "Earth extends its gratitude for your welcome into this august body. Though we are newcomers to interstellar society, we come with open minds and peaceful intentions." A ripple of communication signals, some auditory, others electromagnetic, still others pheromonal, circulated through the chamber. Not all of it seemed complimentary. "The Council acknowledges Earth's peaceful intentions," replied Zandrak, "though we note with some concern your species' categorization as Class 12 Deathworlders. For the benefit of all representatives, I shall clarify. Humanity evolved on a planet with high gravity, extreme temperature variations, toxic atmospheric components, dangerous levels of radiation, and an unprecedented diversity of predatory and microscopic threats." Jake maintained his diplomatic smile despite the slight. This wasn't unexpected. Earth's classification had been a point of contention since first contact 3 years ago. The galaxy, it seemed, was populated primarily by species that had evolved in far more forgiving environments. "We prefer to think of it as adaptability." "High Counselor," Jake replied smoothly. "The challenges of our homeworld have taught us resilience and ingenuity, qualities we hope to contribute to the greater galactic community." Before Zandrak could respond, the massive doors at the far end of the chamber burst open with a thunderous crack. The assembled representatives turned in shock as crystalline beings stumbled into the hall, their translucent bodies pulsing with internal light that shifted rapidly between colors, a sign of extreme distress in their species. "The Keth," murmured Tessa, quickly pulling up information on her datapad. "Silicon-based crystalline entities from the Cygnus arm." The lead Keith's voice resonated through the chamber like vibrating glass. "The Council must help us. The swarm approaches our homeworld. They have already consumed our outer colonies." Panic rippled through the assembly. Jake noted how several species retreated deeper into their alcoves, while others began emitting what his translator identified as prayers or protective incantations. High Counselor Zandrak raised his tentacles for silence. "Elder Wind through trees, please compose yourself and explain the situation." The crystalline being, Elder Wind through trees, apparently, struggled to stabilize the colors flowing through its body. The swarm entered our system 3 standard cycles ago. They have already consumed the populations of our mining colonies on the outer planets. Our scientific estimates indicate they will reach our homeworld in approximately 3 of your Earth months. 7 billion Keth will die if nothing is done. Murmurs of sympathy rippled through the chamber, but Jake noted the distinct absence of offers for assistance. Instead, High Counselor Zandrak spoke with measured calm. The Council extends its deepest sympathies to the Keth people. We shall immediately authorize emergency evacuation protocols. How many citizens can your current fleet transport? Jake frowned. Evacuation? Not defense? Zandrak's tentacles stiffened slightly, the equivalent of a raised eyebrow. Ambassador Morrison, perhaps you are unfamiliar with the entity known as the Swarm. They are a biological collective intelligence that consumes all organic and silicon-based life forms it encounters. They cannot be reasoned with, as they possess no higher consciousness beyond consumption and reproduction. The standard protocol for swarm incursions is immediate evacuation of threatened populations. Elder Wind, through trees' crystalline form, vibrated with distress. Our current ships can only transport perhaps 2 billion of our people. And where would we go? We require specific environmental conditions. Our biology is attuned to our world's unique radiation signature. The Council will coordinate temporary settlement options. Zandrak replied smoothly. As for the remaining population, we shall note their sacrifice in the archives of remembrance. Jake felt his diplomatic training slipping. You're just going to write off 5 billion sentient beings. A hush fell over the chamber. Jake realized he had spoken much louder than diplomatic protocol allowed. Zandrak's translator conveyed his tone as regretfully patronizing. Ambassador Morrison, I understand this is your first council session. The Swarm has been a galactic reality for thousands of years. They cannot be defeated by conventional means, only avoided. Even our most advanced weaponry merely slows their advance. The sacrifice of some for the survival of the species is regrettable, but necessary. Jake looked around the chamber, noting the expressions of resignation on the faces of those species, whose expressions he could read. Then he looked back at the crystalline forms of the Keth delegation, their internal lights now pulsing a deep indigo that his cultural briefing identified as the color of profound despair. In that moment, something shifted in Jake Morrison. He had come to this chamber as a cautious diplomat, instructed to make no waves, to secure Earth's position in galactic society through measured deference. But faced with the imminent extinction of billions of sentient beings and the Council's callous acceptance of that fact, he felt a much older, much more human instinct rise within him. Earth will fight, he declared, his voice cutting through the chamber like a blade. Stunned silence followed, broken only by the soft, crystalline tinkling that indicated shock from the Keth delegation. Ambassador Morrison, said Zandrak carefully. Perhaps there has been a translation error. You cannot possibly mean. I mean exactly what I said. Jake interrupted, abandoning protocol entirely now. If the Keth ask for our help, Earth will send ships, soldiers, and whatever else we can spare to defend their homeworld against this swarm. That would be suicide, hissed a reptilian counselor from the upper tiers. No single species has ever successfully repelled a full swarm incursion. Jake stood his ground. Then perhaps it's time for a new approach. We humans have some experience with fighting against impossible odds. High Counselor Zandrak's tentacles had gone rigid with shock. Ambassador Morrison, I must remind you that you have no authority to commit your species to such a reckless venture without proper consultation with your government. Jake smiled thinly. You're right, of course. I'll need to communicate with Earth immediately. But I know my people. Counselor, we don't abandon others to die when we have the power to help. Elder wind through trees moved forward, crystalline form now pulsing with a cautious amber light. You would really fight for us, a species you have never met before today? Jake looked directly at the crystalline elder. That's what humans do. As Jake's declaration hung in the air, he realized he had just committed Earth to what might be its first interstellar war, against an enemy that the rest of the galaxy considered undefeatable. But looking at the renewed hope glimmering in the crystalline bodies of the Keth, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. The great hall of the Galactic Council hummed with shocked voices as species throughout the chamber processed the humans' unexpected declaration. Jake Morrison stood firm on the central platform, ignoring the mixture of fear, disdain, and disbelief emanating from the assembled representatives. High Counselor Zandrak finally regained his composure, his translator conveying an unmistakable tone of condescension. The Council acknowledges Earth's enthusiastic offer. However, protocol demands we proceed with the evacuation vote. His tentacles moved in the formal pattern that initiated the voting sequence. All those in favor of authorizing emergency evacuation procedures for the Keith homeworld? Lights illuminated across the chamber as species after species registered their approval. Within moments, a near-unanimous consensus had been reached. Only the human delegation and, surprisingly, the Keth themselves had abstained. "The motion carries," announced Zandrak. "Evacuation protocols will commence immediately." Jake stepped forward again. "The human delegation requests immediate access to all available data on the swarm, their biological makeup, tactical patterns, and previous encounters." A ripple of something akin to amusement passed through the chamber. A multi-limbed insectoid representative clicked its mandibles in what Jake's translator identified as derisive laughter. The Deathworlders think they can succeed where millennia of galactic civilization has failed. The insectoid's translator conveyed, "Perhaps we should let them try. It will be an educational experience for the newcomers." Elder wind through trees moved to the edge of the Keith delegation's platform, crystalline body now pulsing with a mixture of blue despair and amber hope. "Ambassador Morrison, while we appreciate your species' willingness to assist, we cannot ask you to sacrifice yourselves in what even we recognize as a futile gesture." Jake met the Elder's gaze steadily. "With respect, Elder, it's not futile until we've tried. Earth has faced extinction-level threats throughout our history, from asteroid impacts to pandemics. We're still here because we refuse to accept defeat." He turned to address the entire council. "I request immediate communication channels to Earth and full access to all swarm-related intelligence. If you won't fight alongside us, at least don't impede our efforts." Zandrak's tentacles waved in a pattern that Jake's cultural training identified as reluctant acquiescence. "The Council will provide the requested data. However, let the record show that we strongly advise against this course of action." Jake nodded curtly. "Noted. High Counselor. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to inform my government that we're going to war." As Jake and his delegation were escorted from the chamber toward the communication hub, Tessa kept pace beside him, her expression a mixture of awe and horror. "Sir, with all due respect, what the hell did you just do?" Jake maintained his diplomatic posture until they were alone in the turbolift. Then his shoulders sagged slightly. "I committed us to a war against space monsters to save crystal people we just met." Not exactly what they covered in diplomatic training. "The President is going to have your head," Tessa warned. "We were explicitly instructed to maintain a non-interventionist stance." Jake straightened his spine. "Would you prefer I had joined the vote to abandon billions to die? Is that the first impression of humanity you want to make on the galaxy? Tessa fell silent for a moment. No, she finally admitted. But I'm not sure promising to fight an undefeatable enemy was the only alternative. Maybe they're not undefeatable, Jake replied, as the turbolift doors opened to reveal the communication center. Maybe they've just never faced humans before. The emergency session of Earth's Unified Security Council convened 12 hours after Jake's transmission reached home. The grand chamber beneath the United Nations complex in New York hummed with tension as representatives from every major nation studied the data streaming across their displays. President Elena Rodriguez of the United States stood at the central podium, her expression grave as she addressed the assembled delegates. Ambassador Morrison's actions, while technically exceeding his authority, have placed us in a position where our response will define humanity's place in galactic society for generations to come. On the main screen, data from the Galactic Council archives displayed horrifying footage of previous swarm encounters, entire worlds stripped of life, fleets of advanced ships torn apart by biological projectiles and corrosive enzymes. The scientific consensus is clear, continued Defense Secretary William Chen, indicating the analysis prepared by Earth's leading xenobiologists. The swarm operates as a single distributed intelligence composed of billions of specialized organisms. They consume organic and silicon-based life forms, incorporating useful genetic material into their collective. They have no known language or culture, only an insatiable drive to feed and reproduce. General Hassan Ibrahim of the International Defense Force stood next. Based on the Council data, conventional weapons have limited effectiveness against swarm bioships. Their ability to rapidly adapt to threats makes them particularly dangerous in prolonged engagements. Then why are we even discussing this? Demanded the representative from Brazil. Ambassador Morrison may have spoken rashly, but we can simply explain that he overstepped his authority. Jake, participating via secure link from the Council station, felt his stomach tighten at the words. But before he could respond, another voice cut through the chamber. And what message would that send to the galaxy? Asked Admiral Lisa Hayes, commander of Earth's nascent interstellar fleet. The tall, dark-skinned woman's presence commanded attention as she stepped to the center of the chamber. That humans make empty promises, that we abandon those in need? Is that really how we want to introduce ourselves to the stars? Admiral Hayes. The Chinese representative spoke carefully. Your passion is admirable, but this is not merely about our reputation. The data suggests we would be sacrificing valuable ships and lives in a battle we cannot win. With respect, Admiral Hayes replied, the data reflects conventional approaches, but humans have never been conventional. She tapped her data pad, bringing up new schematics on the main display. I've been consulting with our weapons development teams. We have options that the Council species may not have considered. President Rodriguez studied the schematics with narrowed eyes. These are extreme measures. Admiral. Yes, Madam President. Chemical, biological, and radiological weapons adapted for space warfare. Not elegant, certainly not clean, but potentially effective against a biological enemy. A murmur ran through the chamber. Earth's unified government had strictly controlled such weapons for decades. We're talking about weapons banned by multiple treaties, pointed out the European Union representative. Treaties that apply to human conflicts, Admiral Hayes countered. This is an extinction-level threat to another species, and potentially to us if the swarm ever reaches Earth's neighborhood. Sometimes survival requires getting your hands dirty. The debate raged for hours. Jake watched from his communication station light years away, alternating between hope and despair as the representatives argued ethics, practicality, and interstellar politics. Finally, President Rodriguez called for silence. We have heard all perspectives. Now we must decide. This will be a simple majority vote. The question before this council is, will Earth honor Ambassador Morrison's commitment to defend the Kith homeworld against the swarm? Jake held his breath as the votes were tallied. The numbers climbed on both sides until finally, President Rodriguez announced the result. By a margin of 7 votes, the council has decided to authorize a defensive mission to the Kith homeworld. She turned to face the camera, transmitting to Jake. Ambassador Morrison, inform the Kith that Earth will stand with them. Admiral Hayes, you will command this operation. You have full authorization to employ whatever measures you deem necessary to defeat this threat. Jake felt a weight lift from his shoulders, even as a new one settled in its place. They would fight, but could they win? In the 3 weeks that followed, Earth became a hive of frantic activity. Admiral Lisa Hayes established her command center in the orbital headquarters above Earth, coordinating what would be humanity's first interstellar military campaign. We need to rethink our entire approach to warfare, she told her assembled commanders during their first strategy session. The swarm isn't an enemy we can negotiate with or intimidate. They don't have supply lines we can cut or political centers we can target. This is pure biological warfare, and we need to fight fire with fire. She turned to the civilian scientist who had been quiet until now. Dr. Sarah Kim, please brief the team on your research. Dr. Kim rose from her seat, her manner reserved but her eyes intense. The Korean-American parasitologist had been recruited directly from her research at the Centers for Disease Control. The swarm operates as a distributed organism with specialized components, she began, displaying complex biological schematics. Based on the data provided by the Galactic Council, I've identified several potential vulnerabilities. First, while individual swarm units can rapidly evolve to counter threats, the collective adaptation requires certain communication processes. If we can disrupt these processes, we may be able to prevent coordinated adaptation. She tapped her display, bringing up molecular diagrams. Second, and more promising, the swarm's rapid consumption of biomass requires specialized digestive enzymes. My team has developed a synthetic compound that may trigger a cascade failure in their digestive process, essentially giving the entire swarm fatal indigestion. Admiral Hayes nodded appreciatively. And this compound can be weaponized? Yes, Dr. Kim confirmed. We can deliver it via conventional warheads, though direct introduction into their biological systems would be most effective. Meaning boarding parties, murmured Commander Alex Reed, head of the Zero-G Marines. The burly, scarred veteran had been skeptical of the mission from the start. You want us to inject poison directly into space monsters? That would be the most efficient delivery method, Dr. Kim replied calmly. Commander Reed's laugh held no humor. Hell of a first deployment for my Marines. They'll need specialized training, Admiral Hayes noted. Dr. Kim, how long until your compound is ready for field testing? We can begin preliminary tests within 48 hours, full production within 2 weeks if the tests confirm our models. Admiral Hayes studied the tactical displays showing the fleet assembly in Earth orbit. 200 ships, not as many as I'd like. But we'll have to make do. Commander Reed, I want your Marines training for extreme environment combat scenarios immediately. Dr. Kim, you have whatever resources you need to perfect that compound. As the meeting adjourned, Admiral Hayes held Dr. Kim back. There's something you're not saying. What is it? The scientist hesitated. The compound will work. Admiral. But there's a moral question here. What we're creating is essentially a biological weapon designed to cause maximum suffering to an entire species. A species that consumes other sentient beings, Hayes pointed out. Yes, but they do so without malice. It's their nature. We're deliberately engineering their suffering and extinction. I just want to be sure we've considered the ethical implications. Admiral Hayes' expression softened slightly. I appreciate your concern, Doctor. Truly. But right now, 7 billion Kith are facing extinction. If we have to cross some ethical lines to save them, I can live with that burden. Dr. Kim nodded slowly. As can I, Admiral. I just needed to hear you say it. Meanwhile, at the Zero-G Marine Training Facility in Earth's orbit, Commander Alex Reed put his troops through brutal training scenarios. The cavernous chamber could simulate various gravity conditions, atmospheric compositions, and environmental hazards. Faster! Reed barked, as a squad maneuvered through a zero-gravity obstacle course while wearing fully sealed combat suits. The swarm won't wait for you to find your space legs. Lieutenant Maya Patel, his second in command, monitored the Marines' biometric readings. Sir, they've been at this for 6 hours. Even with stims, they're reaching physical limits. Reed's scarred face remained impassive. The swarm doesn't tire, Lieutenant. Neither can we. With respect, sir, driving them to collapse won't help. We need them functional for the actual mission. Reed finally nodded. Call a 2-hour recovery period, then back at it. And Lieutenant, join me in the tactical room. I want to review the swarm ship schematics again. In the small tactical room, Reed displayed the biological architecture of the swarm vessels. These aren't ships in the conventional sense. They're organisms, grown, not built. Look at these structures here. He pointed to what appeared to be massive, pulsating organs. These are their reproductive centers. Each ship can birth new vessels if given enough biomass to consume. Lieutenant Patel studied the diagrams with a grimace. So we need to target these reproduction chambers first. Exactly. If we can't kill them all, we need to at least prevent them from making more of themselves. Reed's finger traced the convoluted biological corridors. The challenge will be reaching these chambers. They're typically at the core of the largest vessels, protected by thousands of drone organisms. And we'll be doing this while wearing suits designed to withstand corrosive atmospheres, Patel added grimly. Nobody said saving the galaxy would be comfortable. Lieutenant. Reed's attempt at humor fell flat as they both contemplated the mission ahead. 3 weeks later, Earth's fleet assembled at the jump point. 200 ships ranging from massive carriers to nimble corvettes, all retrofitted with new weapon systems designed specifically for the coming battle. The flagship, EDF Horizon, housed Admiral Hayes' command center, Dr. Kim's research team, and Commander Reed's Marine Strike Force. On the bridge, Admiral Hayes surveyed her fleet with a mixture of pride and trepidation. Earth had never mounted a military operation of this scale, let alone one that would take place light years from home. All ships report ready, Admiral, announced her communications officer. Hayes nodded. Open a fleet-wide channel. The officer complied, and Hayes took a moment to gather her thoughts before speaking. Men and women of Earth's defense fleet. This is Admiral Hayes. In a few moments, we will make the jump to the Kith system to engage an enemy unlike any humanity has faced before. I won't sugarcoat this. The swarm is deadly, adaptive, and has defeated many species before us. She paused, letting her words sink in. But those species weren't human. They weren't Deathworlders. They didn't evolve on a planet that tried to kill them every day of their existence. We did. Our ancestors survived predators, plagues, natural disasters, and each other. That heritage of survival against all odds is our greatest weapon. Her voice strengthened as she continued. We fight today not just for the Kith, though saving their 7 billion lives would be reason enough. We fight to show the galaxy what humanity stands for, that we protect the vulnerable, that we face threats head-on, that we do not abandon others to die when we have the power to help. Throughout the fleet, crews listened in silence, each processing the weight of the mission ahead. Some of us won't return from this mission, but those we save will remember that when the rest of the galaxy voted to abandon them, Earth stood and fought. That legacy will endure long after we're gone. Hayes straightened her uniform. Prepare for jump sequence. May whatever gods you believe in watch over us all. Hayes out. The jump engines engaged across the fleet, tearing holes in the fabric of space-time. In a cascade of blinding light, 200 ships vanished from Earth's system, committed to a battle that would either establish humanity's place among the stars or end in catastrophic defeat. The fleet emerged from jump space at the edge of the Keith system, their sensors immediately scanning for swarm activity. The system's star cast a pale blue light across the assembled ships, glinting off their hulls as they maintained tight formation. Sensor sweep complete. Admiral, reported the tactical officer on the Horizon's bridge. Multiple swarm signatures detected in the outer system. They appear to be consuming the resources of the gas giant's moons. Admiral Hayes studied the tactical display. How many vessels? Approximately 50. Ma'am. Varying sizes. Most appear to be Harvester class, but there are several larger vessels that match the carrier designation from the Council data. Hayes's expression remained calm, but internally she felt a surge of both relief and concern. 50 ships was a manageable number for their first engagement. But where was the main swarm fleet that had the Council so terrified? Deploy reconnaissance drones, she ordered. I want detailed scans of their biology before we engage, and get me a direct line to the Kith homeworld. Within minutes, a crystalline face appeared on the main view screen, elder wind through trees, his internal lights now pulsing with an anxious green. Admiral Hayes. The elder's translated voice resonated with hope. You actually came. Many among my people doubted the humans would honor their word. We keep our promises, Elder, Hayes replied. We've detected swarm vessels in your outer system. Do you have updated intelligence on their main fleet's position? The crystalline being's lights shifted to a more somber blue. Our long-range sensors detect a massive concentration of swarm vessels approaching from the direction of our former colony worlds. Thousands of ships. Admiral, they will arrive within 15 of your Earth days. Hayes kept her expression neutral despite the troubling news. Then we have 15 days to prepare. Elder, we'll need to coordinate with your defense forces, and I need to know everything about your planet's environment, atmosphere, gravity, radiation levels. My troops may need to operate on the surface. Of course, Admiral, I shall transmit all relevant data immediately. And thank you. Whatever happens, know that the Keth will remember Earth's courage. As the transmission ended, Hayes turned to her waiting officers. Well, now we know where the main fleet is. 15 days gives us time to test our weapons on this advance force. Commander Reed, prepare your Marines for boarding operations. Dr. Kim, is your compound ready for deployment? Dr. Kim nodded. Yes. Admiral, we've produced enough to affect all the swarm vessels currently in the system. Delivery is the challenge now. That's where my Marines come in, Reed interjected. We'll deliver your poison right to the heart of their ships. Hayes nodded. Good. We engage in 6 hours. I want to observe their behavior first. See how they respond to our presence. The reconnaissance drones returned disturbing footage. The swarm vessels, massive organic constructs that resembled nothing so much as floating organs, connected by sinuous tendrils, were systematically consuming a mining outpost on one of the gas giant's moons. Their method was horrifyingly efficient. Specialized organisms breached the outpost's walls, while others captured the fleeing Keth workers. The captives were not killed immediately, but dragged back to the swarm vessels. They're taking them alive, murmured Lieutenant Patel as the command staff reviewed the footage. Not for long, Reed responded grimly. According to the Council data, the swarm keeps captives alive only long enough to extract information about additional resources and populations. Then they're processed for their biological material. Admiral Hayes had seen enough. We move now. Tactical. Prepare firing solutions for all ships. Target their propulsion structures first. I want to limit their mobility. Commander Reed, get your boarding teams ready. Once we've disabled some of these vessels, you'll move in to deliver Dr. Kim's compound directly to their reproductive centers. The fleet moved into attack formation, advancing toward the unsuspecting swarm vessels still busy with their grim harvest. For the first time in galactic history, humans would engage the nightmare that had terrorized countless civilizations. All ships, weapons free, Hayes commanded. Let's show them what Deathworlders can do. The first salvo from Earth's fleet tore through space, not the elegant energy weapons favored by most Council species, but brutal kinetic projectiles and chemical warheads. The swarm vessels, apparently unaccustomed to such primitive but effective weapons, reacted slowly. Several smaller craft were torn apart immediately, their organic hulls rupturing to release clouds of viscous fluid into the vacuum. Direct hits on multiple targets, reported the tactical officer. Swarm vessels are beginning to respond. They're releasing defensive organisms. Hayes watched as the larger swarm ships extruded what looked like clouds of smaller entities, biological drones that moved with alarming speed toward the human fleet. Point defense systems active, Hayes ordered. Let's see how they like a dose of chlorine gas. Special warheads detonated in the path of the oncoming swarm drones, releasing clouds of chemicals lethal to most organic life forms. The effect was immediate and satisfying. The drones writhed and disintegrated as the chemicals attacked their cellular structures. "It's working!" exclaimed the tactical officer. "For now," Hayes cautioned. "Remember, they adapt quickly. We need to press the advantage while we have it. Commander Reed, select your targets for boarding." Reed studied the tactical display. There. That larger vessel seems to be coordinating the others. If we can introduce Dr. Kim's compound into that one, it might affect their command structure. Hayes nodded. "Make it happen. Commander?" In the launch bay, Reed addressed his Marine strike team, 50 men and women in specialized combat suits designed to withstand the corrosive atmosphere inside swarm vessels. Each carried delivery systems for Dr. Kim's compound, essentially specialized injector weapons that would introduce the toxin directly into the swarm's biological systems. "This isn't a standard boarding action," Reed warned them. "We're essentially going to inject poison into a living organism. Expect the ship itself to respond as if fighting an infection, because that's exactly what we'll be." Lieutenant Patel checked her weapons charge. "And if the ship decides to self-destruct rather than be infected?" Reed's expression was grim behind his helmet visor. "Then we make sure the job is done before we go out with it. Remember your training. Move fast. Hit the target. Extract. Don't engage swarm drones unless absolutely necessary. They're not the objective." The Marines boarded their assault craft, sleek, heavily armored vessels designed for rapid insertion and extraction. As the bay doors opened to the blackness of space, Reed offered one final thought to his troops. "Today we make history. The first humans to board a swarm vessel, and the first to show the galaxy that these things can be killed." The assault craft shot from the horizon toward their target, escorted by fighter craft that cleared a path through the increasingly dense field of swarm drones. As they approached the massive organic vessel, its surface rippled and contorted, sensing the threat. "Prepare for impact," Reed warned, as their pilot aimed for what scans indicated was a thinner section of the hull. "Breach charges ready." The assault craft slammed into the swarm vessel, breach charges detonating on contact. The organic hull resisted briefly before giving way with a sickening tear. Immediately, the Marines deployed, moving through the rupture into the nightmare interior of the living ship. Inside, they found themselves in what resembled a massive circulatory system, more than a vessel corridor. The walls pulsed with fluid movements, and the air, contained somehow despite the breach, was thick with organic particles that would have been lethal without their sealed suits. "Movement ahead," warned Patel, her sensors detecting approaching threats. "Defensive formation," ordered Reed. "Remember, we push through to the central reproduction chamber. That's our primary target." The first swarm drones rounded the organic corridor, nightmare amalgamations of claws, sensory organs, and digestive openings. They moved with unsettling speed, skittering along the walls and ceiling as well as the floor. "Controlled bursts," Reed commanded as his Marines opened fire. "Conserve ammunition." The specialized rounds tore through the drone organisms, spilling caustic fluids that hissed and bubbled against the corridor walls. But for each drone they dropped, more appeared behind. "They're trying to overwhelm us with numbers," Patel observed, firing steadily. "Classic infection response. Flood the intruder with white blood cells. Then we need to move faster." Reed decided. "Zhu, Rodriguez, deploy smoke charges. Let's confuse their sensory organs." The specialized charges released dense clouds of particles designed to interfere with the biological sensors the swarm used instead of eyes. The effect was immediate. The drones became disoriented, colliding with each other and the walls. "Move now!" Reed ordered, and the Marine team pushed forward through the confusion, deeper into the living vessel. They fought their way through 3 more defensive waves, losing 2 Marines to acid projectiles that breached their suits. The organic corridors grew wider as they approached the center of the vessel, pulsating more intensely with what seemed like the ship's distress. "We're close," Reed announced, checking the schematics Dr. Kim had prepared. "The reproduction chamber should be just ahead." They emerged into a cavernous space that defied easy description. Massive, organ-like structures hung from the ceiling, pulsating rhythmically. The walls were lined with translucent sacs containing what appeared to be developing swarm organisms in various stages of growth. At the center, a pulsing mass of tissue glowed with bioluminescent energy. "That's our target," Reed confirmed, pointing to the central mass. "All teams, deploy Dr. Kim's compound according to the protocol." The Marines moved to strategic points around the chamber, preparing to inject the toxic compound directly into the reproductive tissue. But as they approached, the chamber itself seemed to sense their intent. The walls contracted violently, and from concealed orifices, a new type of defense drone emerged, larger, more heavily armored, with multiple acid-projecting organs. "Elite defenders!" shouted Patel, as the first acid spray narrowly missed her. "They're protecting the reproductive center." The Marines engaged the new threat, their specialized weapons proving less effective against the reinforced biological armor of these elite drones. 3 more Marines fell in the initial exchange, their suits breached by the powerful acid. Reed assessed the situation rapidly. They were losing momentum, and more defenders were emerging every second. Soon they would be overwhelmed. "New plan," he announced over the squad channel. "Lieutenant Patel, take half the team and continue with the injection protocol. The rest of us will draw their fire." "Sir, that's—" Patel began to object. "An order, Lieutenant." Reed cut her off. "Complete the mission. That's what matters." Before she could protest further, Reed led his group directly toward the largest concentration of defender drones, firing continuously to draw their attention. "Come on, you biological nightmares! Let's see how you handle real predators!" The tactic worked. The defender drones focused on the more immediate threat, allowing Patel's team to approach the central reproductive mass with less opposition. They began the injection process, driving specialized delivery systems directly into the pulsating tissue. Reed's team fought valiantly, but they were gradually pushed back by the overwhelming numbers. Reed himself took an acid hit to his left arm, the protective material of his suit smoking as it was eaten away. Injection process at 50%, Patel reported. "Keep going," Reed encouraged, firing one-handed now as his injured arm hung useless at his side. The chamber suddenly convulsed violently, nearly throwing the Marines off their feet. The central mass began to discolor, turning from its healthy bioluminescent blue to a sickly yellow. "It's working!" exclaimed one of Patel's team. "The compound is affecting the reproductive tissue." The defender drones seemed to react to their host's distress, becoming more frenzied but less coordinated in their attacks. Reed's team pressed the advantage, pushing back toward the central area. "Injection complete," Patel announced. "Compound is fully deployed." "Excellent work," Reed replied, voice tight with pain. "All units, prepare for extraction. Back to the breach point." As they began their withdrawal, the entire vessel shuddered. The walls of the reproductive chamber began to contract erratically, crushing some of the defender drones in their spasms. "The ship is dying," observed Patel, "and it's not happy about it." They fought their way back through increasingly chaotic internal defenses. The vessel's organized response had broken down as Dr. Kim's compound spread through its systems. But this made the environment more dangerous, not less. Corridors collapsed without warning, and rogue defender drones attacked without coordination or strategy. When they finally reached the breach point, Reed counted their numbers with grim satisfaction. They had lost 12 Marines, a heavy toll, but less than he had feared when planning the mission. "Extraction craft is 2 minutes out," Patel informed him, checking their comms. "The fleet engagement is going well. 3 more boarding teams have successfully deployed the compound on other vessels." Reed nodded, then staggered as another wave of pain shot through his injured arm. The acid had eaten through to the undersuit now, and he could feel it beginning to burn his skin. Patel noticed immediately. "Sir, your suit breach is worsening. We need to get you to medical." "I'll be fine, Lieutenant," Reed assured her, though they both knew the severity of acid burns from swarm weapons. The extraction craft arrived, docking with expert precision at the breach point. The surviving Marines boarded quickly, helping their wounded comrades. As Reed prepared to board, a final violent contraction of the dying vessel sent a section of organic ceiling crashing down toward the breach point. Reed saw it coming and made a split-second decision, shoving Patel fully into the extraction craft before leaping back. "Commander!" Patel cried out as the falling tissue blocked the breach, separating Reed from the extraction craft. Reed's voice came through on the comm, strangely calm. "Get our people out of here, Lieutenant. That's an order." "We're not leaving you, sir," Patel protested, already organizing Marines to clear the blockage. "The ship is dying. Patel, it'll be completely gone in minutes." Reed's voice remained steady. "Besides, this arm isn't looking too good. Someone needs to make sure the job is finished." "Commander, please!" "Tell Admiral Hayes the compound works. Tell her, Deathworlders know how to win." There was a pause, then Reed added more softly, "It's been an honor serving with you, Maya." Before Patel could respond, a series of explosions rocked the vessel. Reed had detonated his remaining charges deeper in the ship, ensuring that the reproductive chamber would be completely destroyed. "Go," came his final command. With tears streaming down her face inside her helmet, Lieutenant Patel gave the order to disengage. The extraction craft pulled away just as the massive swarm vessel began to rupture from within, tearing itself apart as Dr. Kim's compound completed its devastating work. On the bridge of the horizon, Admiral Hayes received the news of Commander Reed's sacrifice with a stoic nod, allowing herself only a moment of silence before returning to the battle at hand. His actions ensured the mission's success. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Patel, her voice steady despite her grief. "The compound works exactly as Dr. Kim predicted. The affected vessels are destroying themselves." Hayes studied the tactical display. Of the 50 swarm vessels they had engaged, 37 had already been destroyed or were in the process of self-destruction. The remaining 13 were attempting to retreat, their biological propulsion systems visibly deteriorating. "No survivors," Hayes ordered. "Not one ship can escape to warn the main fleet or adapt to our weapon." The fleet pursued the fleeing vessels, methodically destroying each one with overwhelming firepower. When the last swarm ship had been reduced to drifting organic debris, Hayes addressed her command staff. "Phase 1 is complete. Now we prepare for the main fleet. We have 15 days to perfect our strategy based on what we've learned today." She turned to Dr. Kim, who had watched the entire engagement from the science station. "Your compound exceeded expectations. Doctor, can we produce enough to affect thousands of ships instead of dozens?" Dr. Kim's expression was troubled. "The compound itself isn't the limitation, Admiral. It's the delivery method. We've proven that direct injection into their reproductive centers is effective, but that required Marines to board the vessels. At a heavy cost," added Lieutenant Patel quietly. Hayes nodded in acknowledgement of both the scientific challenge and the human sacrifice. "Then we need to develop alternative delivery methods. What about adapting the compound to survive in vacuum? Could we create a biological weapon that spreads from ship to ship?" Dr. Kim considered this. "Possibly. The swarm vessels do exchange biological material when in proximity to each other. If we could introduce the compound into their external membranes rather than their reproductive centers." "Work on it," Hayes instructed. "In the meantime, we'll coordinate with the Keth. Their crystalline biology gives them unique insights into the swarm that might help us develop new approaches." Over the next 2 weeks, the combined human and Keith forces prepared for the arrival of the main swarm fleet. Dr. Kim worked tirelessly with Keith scientists to refine her compound, eventually developing a version that could be transmitted through direct contact between swarm vessels. "It's elegant, really," she explained during the final briefing. "The swarm's strength, its highly communicative biological network, becomes its weakness. Once one ship is infected, it will pass the compound to others through normal biological exchanges." Admiral Hayes studied the new deployment plan. "So we no longer need boarding parties to inject the compound directly into their reproductive centers?" "Correct. We still need to breach their hulls and introduce the compound to their external membranes, but that can be done with specialized warheads. No Marines need to enter the vessels." Lieutenant Patel, now leading the Marine forces following Commander Reed's death, nodded in grim satisfaction. Reed would approve. His sacrifice taught us what we needed to know. As the briefing concluded, the long-range sensors detected the approaching swarm main fleet. The numbers were staggering. Over 8,000 vessels of varying sizes, from small drone ships to massive carrier organisms larger than anything they had encountered in the advance force. "They'll be here in 6 hours, Hayes announced to her assembled commanders. "Return to your ships. Today we make our stand." The combined human-Keith fleet took up defensive positions around the crystalline homeworld. 200 Earth vessels and approximately 300 Keith ships, the entirety of their spacefaring capability, against an armada of biological nightmares that had consumed countless civilizations. As the swarm fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, Admiral Hayes opened a channel to all ships. "This is Admiral Hayes. The enemy has arrived. Remember why we fight. Not just for the 7 billion Keith on the planet below, but for every species that has lived in fear of the swarm. Today, we show the galaxy that these monsters can be defeated. Today, we prove that sometimes the most dangerous predators in the universe are humans. The swarm attacked without preamble or strategy beyond overwhelming force. Thousands of biological vessels surged forward, releasing clouds of smaller drone organisms that darkened space itself with their numbers. "Hold position," Hayes commanded as her officers tensed at the approaching nightmare. "Let them come to us. Our defense grid is optimized at this range." When the first wave of swarm drones entered their defensive perimeter, the combined fleet opened fire. Specialized chemical warheads detonated among the dense clouds of biological attackers, while kinetic weapons tore through the larger vessels that followed close behind. The battle quickly devolved into chaotic furball engagements throughout the defensive sphere. Human ships, more maneuverable than their Keith allies, darted in and out of the fighting, deploying Dr. Kim's compound whenever they could breach a swarm vessel's hull. On the Horizon's bridge, Hayes coordinated the defense with calm precision, shifting resources to shore up weakening sections of their formation. But the sheer numbers of the swarm were telling. For every vessel they destroyed, 10 more took its place. "Admiral," called out the tactical officer urgently, "they're targeting the evacuation corridors." Hayes snapped her attention to the display. True to the tactical officer's warning, a significant portion of the swarm fleet was maneuvering to cut off the designated evacuation routes where Keith civilian ships were attempting to flee the system. "They're learning," Hayes murmured. "Divert Battle Group 3 to reinforce the evacuation corridor. Nothing gets through to those civilian ships." The battle raged for hours, with losses mounting on both sides. Earth ships, despite their advanced technology and tactics, were being overwhelmed by the swarm's inexhaustible numbers. The Keith vessels, less combat-capable than their human allies, suffered even heavier casualties. "Admiral," reported the communications officer, "Elder Wind through trees is requesting to speak with you." Hayes nodded, and the crystalline elder appeared on the view screen. His internal lights now pulsed with a resolute amber. "Admiral Hayes, your fleet fights with remarkable courage, but the swarm numbers are too great. We have managed to evacuate nearly 1 billion of our people, but the rest—" Hayes understood the unspoken question. "We're not abandoning your people. Elder, not while we still have ships that can fight." The Elder's lights shifted to a complex pattern Hayes couldn't interpret. "The Keith Science Council has completed their work on your Dr. Kim's compound. We believe we can enhance its effectiveness by orders of magnitude." Hayes leaned forward. "How?" "By introducing it directly into our atmosphere. The Keith have a unique crystalline biology that can be attuned to carry specific molecular patterns. If we release the compound into our upper atmosphere, and the swarm attempts to harvest our population, as they typically do, they'll become infected on a massive scale." Hayes finished, understanding dawning. "But Elder, this would mean sacrificing your world." "Not sacrificing, Admiral, weaponizing. This is our home, our contribution to the battle. The compound will not harm Keth, only swarm. When they come to consume us, they'll consume their own destruction." Hayes nodded slowly. "Are you certain?" The Elder's lights pulsed with firm resolve. "My people would rather transform our world into a weapon than see it consumed. We have begun the process already. The compound is being released into our atmosphere as we speak." Hayes straightened in her command chair. "Then we need to ensure the swarm reaches your planet's surface. We'll adjust our strategy instead of preventing their landing. We'll channel them toward specific sites where the compound concentration is highest." New tactical plans were quickly formulated. The human and remaining Keith ships regrouped, forming corridors that appeared to be defensive weaknesses, but were actually designed to funnel swarm vessels toward the planet's surface. "It's working," reported the tactical officer hours later. "Swarm landing parties are touching down in the primary target zones. They're beginning harvesting operations." On the view screens, they watched as swarm vessels descended to the crystalline planet's surface, extending biological tendrils to capture Keith citizens, who were not fleeing as expected, but gathering in the designated high-concentration zones. "The Keth are sacrificing themselves to ensure maximum swarm exposure," murmured Lieutenant Patel, watching the feeds with a mixture of horror and admiration. "Not sacrificing," corrected Hayes. "Fighting, in their own way." The effect began subtly at first, individual swarm drones moving erratically, then turning on each other. But it spread with exponential speed as the infected organisms returned to their ships, carrying the enhanced compound with them. Within hours, reports flooded in from across the system of swarm vessels attacking one another. Their biological imperative to consume now turned inward by the ingenious compound. "Admiral," called out the sensor officer in disbelief, "the swarm fleet it's tearing itself apart." The tactical displays confirmed it. Throughout the system, swarm vessels were attacking each other with the same ferocity they had previously directed at the defenders. The massive biological fleet was devouring itself from within. "Press the advantage," Hayes ordered, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "Target any vessels that appear to be resisting the compound's effects. Don't let a single ship escape to evolve immunity." The combined fleet moved methodically through the system, eliminating swarm stragglers as the bulk of the alien armada consumed itself in a frenzy of biological cannibalism. Ship after ship tore into its neighbors, absorbing their biomass only to be consumed in turn as the compound spread inexorably through the entire swarm. When the final swarm vessel had been confirmed destroyed, a strange silence fell over the fleet. Of the original 200 Earthships, only 117 remained. The Keth fleet had fared worse, with barely 80 vessels surviving. But on the crystalline planet below, over 6 billion Keth still lived, protected from the swarm not by evacuation, but by the unexpected alliance with Earth's Deathworlders. In the quiet aftermath, Admiral Hayes stood on the horizon's observation deck, watching the crystalline planet rotate slowly beneath them. Lieutenant Patel joined her, standing in respectful silence for several moments before speaking. "The Keith are hailing you as a hero, Admiral. They're saying songs will be crystallized in your honor for 10,000 years. Hayes smiled faintly. "The real heroes are the ones who didn't make it home. Commander Reed. All the Marines and crew we lost." She turned to face Patel. "And the Kith themselves. They were willing to turn their entire world into a weapon to defeat their enemy. That's courage I'm not sure even humans could match." Patel nodded. "What happens now?" "Now," Hayes sighed. "We go home. We bury our dead. We rebuild our fleet. And we show the galaxy that humanity is a force to be reckoned with, not because we're conquerors, but because we're defenders." 3 weeks later, Ambassador Jake Morrison once again stood in the great metallic hall of the Galactic Council. Beside him stood Admiral Lisa Hayes, still wearing her formal dress uniform despite the exhaustion evident in her eyes. The chamber was utterly silent as they entered, a stark contrast to the murmurs and movements that had accompanied Jake's first appearance. The representatives of 47 species watched in solemn attention as the humans took their place on the central platform. High Counselor Xandrak's tentacles moved in a pattern Jake had never seen before, a gesture his translator identified as profound respect. "Ambassador Morrison, Admiral Hayes," the High Counselor began. "The Council has convened today to formally acknowledge what can only be described as an unprecedented achievement. The swarm, which has plagued galactic civilization for millennia, has been defeated. 7 billion Keith lives have been saved. Jake nodded in acknowledgement, but remained silent. He had learned when to let the weight of action speak louder than words. Elder wind through trees moved his crystalline form to the edge of the Keth delegation's platform. His internal lights now pulsed with a deep, rich gold that symbolized the highest honor in Keth culture. The people of Keth wished to bestow upon humanity our most sacred title, Crystal Kin. No non-Keith has ever been granted this honor in our 40,000 years of recorded history. It signifies that you are considered as precious to us as the crystal of our own bodies. Admiral Hayes stepped forward. The people of Earth are honored by this recognition. Elder, we only regret that the cost was so high for both our peoples. Some prices must be paid for survival, the Elder replied, his translated voice resonant with emotion. The Keth understand this now, thanks to your example. High Counselor Zandrak raised his tentacles for attention. The Council must also acknowledge its error in judgment. We dismissed humanity as dangerous Deathworlders, unsuited for the refined civilization of galactic society. We failed to recognize that the very traits we feared, your adaptability, your aggression, your willingness to employ unconventional methods, would become the salvation of not just the Keth, but potentially all species threatened by the swarm. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Therefore, continued Zandrak, the Council extends its formal apology to Earth and its representatives. Furthermore, we wish to offer humanity a permanent seat on the High Council itself, an unprecedented elevation for a species so recently contacted. Jake exchanged a glance with Admiral Hayes before responding. The people of Earth appreciate the Council's recognition. High Counselor, we will consider your generous offer after consultation with our government. His diplomatic response masked the complexity of emotions he felt. Earth had won more than a battle. They had won respect, but that respect had come at a terrible cost in human lives and resources. Was it worth it? Would Earth continue to intervene in galactic affairs, or would they retreat to focus on their own development? As the formal proceedings concluded, and representatives from various species approached to express their newfound admiration for humanity, Jake found himself standing with Hayes and Dr. Kim, who had been recognized for her critical scientific contribution to the victory. What now? Jake asked quietly, voicing the question that had been weighing on all their minds. Admiral Hayes gazed out at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Now we decide what kind of interstellar citizens we want to be. Do we become the galaxy's defenders, its peacekeepers? Or do we focus on our own corner of space and let the rest sort itself out? Dr. Kim adjusted her glasses thoughtfully. Whatever we choose, the galaxy will never look at humans the same way again. Deathworlders has gone from an insult to a title of respect. Jake nodded slowly. Perhaps that's the real victory here. Not just saving the Keth, but showing the galaxy and ourselves what humanity is capable of when challenged. As they stood there, contemplating Earth's new place among the stars, representatives from species that had previously shunned them now approached with offers of alliance, trade, and cultural exchange. The doors that Jake had struggled to open through careful diplomacy had been blown wide by decisive action. For better or worse, humanity had announced its arrival on the galactic stage, not with political maneuvering or economic might, but by doing what humans had always done best throughout their bloody history, fighting fiercely to protect those who could not protect themselves. When aliens had cried for help, Earth's Deathworlders had roared to war, and the galaxy would never be the same.